The frost winds of Kessari Prime cut through even the thickest skin. To Yura, they bit deeper than mere cold. They gnawed at what little hope she still had left. She crouched between the blackened support pillars of a ruined calm tower, ash and snow clinging to her raw, scaled skin. The tattered remains of her garment fluttered weakly in the wind, offering no warmth, no dignity. Only the brand burned into her collarbone reminded her of who she was supposed to be: property. They had called her beautiful once, back when her scales shimmered bronze and her eyes caught the lamplight like molten gold. That was before the raid, before the chains, before the endless cycle of buyers who wanted her only as a curiosity or a plaything. Now, she was too thin, too wild-eyed, too broken to fetch a price. The auctioneer had spat at her feet, called her useless, and thrown her into the wastelands to die. No home, no clothes, no hope. And yet, as twilight bled across the ruined skyline, she felt something stir in her chest, a stubborn ember refusing to die, even in the face of a galaxy that had never shown her mercy. The stranger. She heard the low crunch of boots long before she saw him. Instinct told her to flee, but exhaustion chained her limbs. A tall figure emerged from the drifting snow, wrapped in a long, charcoal coat, frayed at the hem. His breath fogged in the icy air. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but she glimpsed a square jaw, a narrow scar trailing from the corner of his mouth to his chin, and human eyes, gray as storm clouds, staring right at her. He crouched a few paces away, careful not to crowd her. "You look half dead," he rasped, voice rough from old wounds or older regrets. "Are you hurt?" She bared her teeth and hissed, too weak for anything fiercer. She had met humans before, traders, slavers, mercenaries. None had ever brought salvation. But he only nodded, as if he understood. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled off his coat and held it out. "Here, take it." She stared, disbelief warring with a chill that gnawed her bones. Finally, trembling, she reached for it. The moment the heavy fabric wrapped around her shoulders, it felt like more than warmth. It felt like shelter. Like a promise. "Name's Mark," he said softly. "What do they call you?" She swallowed, her voice scraping like stone. "Yura." Silent companions. Mark didn't ask where she came from, nor did he push her to speak. They walked through the ruins in silence, the snowfall growing heavier. His long coat hid the emaciated outline of her body, shielding her from the cutting wind and the gaze of passing scavengers. At night, they camped by the rusting shell of a broken crawler. Mark built a fire with practiced hands, its orange light flickering against the snow. He offered her dry rations, water, and a thermal blanket. She accepted, barely daring to believe it was real. As she ate, she watched him. His face was rough, lined with fatigue and scars, but his movements were careful, measured. At his belt hung a battered plasma sidearm, but he never reached for it, even when she startled awake in the night. She asked, finally, why he had helped her. He stared into the flames. "Because someone once did the same for me," he murmured, as if speaking to ghosts. The Redeye gang. They reached the outskirts of the settlement the next dawn, a sprawl of scrap metal walls and sputtering neon signs. New Kessari outpost. Yura stayed close, clutching his coat around her shoulders. Mark seemed known here. People nodded to him, though some did so with wary eyes. Then the Redeye gang appeared, 3 scar-faced brutes with plasma pistols, red ocular implants glowing under the weak sun. "Mark," sneered the largest, a thick-set man with rusted armor. "We hear you picked up trash from the wastes. Boss says he wants to see the alien." Mark stepped between them and Yura. "She's not for sale." The thug smirked. Everything's for sale, friend. Yura's heart thundered. She had no strength left to fight, no claws sharp enough to protect herself. But before panic could drown her, Mark drew his sidearm with a speed that blurred. "Leave," he said, voice like iron. The Redeyes hesitated. They saw something in his eyes, an edge honed by years of living closer to death than to hope. With curses and muttered threats, they backed away. Mark holstered his weapon, breath slow and controlled. "They won't stop," he warned her softly. "I'll go," Yura whispered. "They want me. If I run, they won't hurt you." His gaze locked on hers, intense, pained. "Don't," he rasped. "You've run enough." A place of her own. Mark led her to a rusted cargo container converted into a living space. It was small, but there was a bed, a heater, and a single cracked mirror. "This was my place," he said. "It's yours now if you want it." She stepped inside. The warmth seeped into her bones, and for the first time in months, maybe years, she felt safe enough to cry. He stood awkwardly at the door, scarred hands curled into fists. "I can fix the door lock tomorrow," he murmured. "Keep you safe." "Why?" she asked through tears. "Why are you doing this?" He looked at her, his storm gray eyes softening. "Because you deserve to stay," he whispered, voice breaking. "Stay with me forever if you want." The words hung in the air, fragile and impossible. She had no family, no tribe, no name beyond a slaver's brand. Yet here was a human, scarred and weary, offering her a home. Slowly she nodded. The fire rekindled. The Redeyes returned, as Mark had known they would. This time they brought more guns. The first shot cracked the morning stillness. Mark shoved Yura behind a collapsed bulkhead. "Stay down," he barked. She had seen men fight before. Brutal, sloppy brawls over scraps. But Mark moved with grim precision, ducking and firing, each shot deliberate. His old scars split anew, blood darkening his shirt, but he didn't waver. When a Redeye closed in, Mark caught the man's wrist, twisted, and fired point-blank. Another rushed him, knocking his pistol aside. Yura watched, heart screaming in her chest, as Mark staggered under a rain of blows. Without thinking, she leaped forward, raking her cracked claws across the attacker's face. Pain exploded in her side as the man struck her back, but she didn't fall. Mark surged up behind her, caught the thug by the neck, and slammed him into the wall. When the dust settled, Mark was bleeding and breathless. Yura's knees buckled, but his arm caught her, pulling her close. "You fought," he rasped. "I couldn't let them take you," she whispered. He touched her cheek, thumb brushing a trail of ash and tears. "Neither could I." Home. The settlement knew better than to challenge them again. Mark repaired the door, reinforced the walls, and added a second bed. At night, Yura still woke from nightmares, heart pounding, breath ragged. But she would find Mark there, quiet, patient, eyes steady, and her fear would ease. She grew stronger, her scales regaining some of their lost luster. Slowly, carefully, Mark taught her to shoot, to barter at the scrap markets, to speak the rough local dialect. They shared silent breakfasts, long walks among the rusted towers, and late nights by a tiny heater where he told her stories of the worlds beyond the stars. And sometimes, when the night wind howled outside and her old fears stirred, he would whisper the words that had saved her once. "Stay with me forever." And she would answer, with voice steady and sure, "I will."